Hey, how you going? Well, g'day everybody. I wanted to talk about Canon. Yes, I did. I've been having a nice discussion online with somebody. You know who you are. Thank you very much. It's been great to talk about it. And it got me to thinking. You know, I needed to process. And I think we're learning a little bit more each day about Sony and Nikon's relationship. Yeah, Sony and Nikon's relationship affects everybody else. So what's this got to do with Canon? Well, it's got everything, of course, to do with Canon. Canon. What's going on? Well, this is what I want to talk about. So you could argue Canon are in a very strong position because they make their own chips. They're in control. They know what's happening. They can do what they want. You could argue with that. But conversely, inversely, transversely, you could argue that Sony and Nikon and many other companies around the world use Sony chips. And that means millions and billions of dollars flow into Sony's coffers for them to create, research and develop new chip technology. And of course, if you want to be cutting edge, state of the art, you need to invest. That's what it's all about. You've got to invest a lot of money to have the greatest and the latest. When Sony launched the A7R IV, the American, I think, CEO or the head of something, the head of marketing, doesn't matter who he was, but he said Sony in the last year had sold 1.4 billion or a number with a billion in it, chips. Now, I can imagine those chips don't cost $1. Whether it's in an iPhone or a Nikon, they're not costing $1. They might cost $10. Some might cost $100. But if you were to average that out, let's say the average chip cost is $20 between the $500 ones or the $200 ones and the $1 ones. But even $1 billion is a ridiculous amount of money. But let's call it 10 at a minimum. Now, I'm extraordinarily confident that Canon do not have somewhere between $1 billion and $10 billion coming into their chip fabrication unit to research and develop the latest and greatest technology. And this is a problem for Canon. Forget everybody else. This is a problem for Canon. The 5D Mark II was an absolutely revolutionary product. It allowed indie filmmakers, photographers, an absolutely fantastic platform for taking photographs and for creating film, for creating video. And of course, the marketing gurus of today say content is all about video. Now this was, I don't know, what, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years ago? Somewhere around there. Was it 2008? 2007? Somewhere around 10 years ago this happened and Canon absolutely exploded. Everybody forgets that Nikon actually brought the first DSLR with video to market, but it was Canon that brought a good one. Sorry, Nikon, but yours was okay, but it was not good. And Canon changed the world right there in that moment. They've been able to trade off what they did with that tech all this time. Now, ever since then, the ongoing iterations of the 5D, the 5D Mark III, the 5D Mark IV, they've been pretty small iterations. And I reckon Canon have had a 10-year-odd run that's been amazing, all based from that point. Obviously, they have other great cameras, and I'm not saying that, but it was that camera. Canon had that level of brand acknowledgement 10 years ago. You know, if you're going to buy a camera, you got to get a Canon. For a lot of people. Not for me, but for a lot of people. And okay, it doesn't matter. Cameras might have a 1% difference between them, but whoever's got the brand wins. So Canon's been trading off that for a very long time. And I think the cold hard facts are that their research and development around their chips has not been keeping up with their main chip competitor, which would be Sony. We know when the, what was it, the 50D-RS or whatever it was called, 50RS, that camera has been criticised for having terrible dynamic range and not very useful ISO. So it would appear that chip did not really cut the mustard. And since then, what have Canon been doing? They've been sitting pretty much on their products, not giving us anything overly revolutionary. Sure, they've got the best focus system in the business, but Sony have caught up. And they've got great color science. Totally agree. But, you know, that's something that can be created by anyone at any point in time. So it doesn't have a monopoly on these things anymore like it used to. And beyond that, well, they're lagging. They're lagging in every other area. Absolutely lagging. Sure, the ergonomics of the Nikon and the Canons are the best, but you can get a Nikon. So back to the chips. Now we have the mirrorless wars. They have begun. Sony started in 2012/2013 and we're off with a bang. You know, their cameras were a little crippled. They weren't good enough in the beginning. I had the Sony A7R, the original, which had the same chip as the D810. That's why I was excited about it. Sony and Nikon sharing tech, have the same chip. It's going to be as good as the D810 in a mirrorless body. How awesome. Sadly, Sony crippled it and gave us a somewhat compressed, lossy RAW file, which in the end it was suggested that was done to keep file sizes down and consistent. But unfortunately, the D800 up against the Sony A7R, the D800 was a superior camera if you're interested in using that wide dynamic range, which I was. So that's okay. It began and they've been iterating and we're now up to the A7R IV in, about 8 years. They've had 4 generations in 8 years. Nikon's had 3, so pretty similar. We can see that Sony and Nikon have been working closely together and have been using the same chips and so on and so forth. And of course, Nikon benefits from Sony's massive R&D development budget. That's what Nikon gets for working with Sony. Whereas Canon have nowhere near the same amount of money to pour into chip development, thus don't have the incentive, and thus I don't think we are seeing the gains in chip technology from Canon. It's simply not happening. And I was talking about mirrorless because, of course, Canon brought out their mirrorless product and they gave us their flagship camera, which is 30 megapixels against, at the time, Sony's 42 and Nikon's 45, almost 46. Why does this chip technology seem to be so old, so backward? What are Canon doing? It's very hard to tell. So ultimately, my conjecture from all of this is Canon don't have the same money to pour into chip design, and that was fine a decade ago, and the camera industry was moving slower and it was iterating slower, so that was fine. Since the 5D Mark II around 10 years ago, Sony's jumped into the market, especially with the E-mount cameras, which is, I suppose, their more modern variant, and they have been pouring every cent into chip technology, which we can now see with the A7R IV, 61 megapixel, increased dynamic range, increased ISO. If that chip is as good as it sounds, it's magic. So Canon's old model doesn't work in this brave new world where Sony are going nuts with R&D on chips. So ultimately, this leads me to what are Canon going to do? They simply don't have the money to make chips as good as Sony's. I feel like they're falling behind. I also think they've got another problem, that they want to protect their video camera dedicated camera market. You know, things like the Canon C200 and the C300. They want to protect that market. So 2 problems. They don't have the money to spend to make chips as good as Sony's, and they're protecting that market. And in the end, that means, and we're seeing it, I think, with the R and the RP, we're just seeing cameras that simply aren't as well spec'd. Why is it only 30 megapixels? Why is there no in-body stabilization? Why is 4K cropped? These are all strange things, and they're not keeping up with their competitors. Is this a marketing decision, or is it simply they don't have the technology? It's very hard to say. Now, of course, they've said in-body stabilization is going to come out, but that might be a year and a half away. Who knows? They kind of have to, because everyone else, they have to say it, and they have to because everyone else is doing it. Ultimately, from a business case perspective, I am concerned Canon simply don't have the grunt and the clout that Sony do, with billions of dollars going into chips that go into so many manufacturers' devices. I think when we're talking about cutting edge technology, Canon don't seem to be there. They've traded off the past. That's not going to work for much longer. There are clear differences between their products and their competitors' products, and I certainly think they need to pull something out of the box real soon. So that's my 5 cents. That's my analysis. I would love to hear what you think. It's a very, very interesting time. I'd love to hear what you think about Canon. I'd love to hear what you think about sensors. Am I talking baloney? Of course, there's more to cameras than just sensors. When you have a mirrorless option from Canon and their top of the range is 30 megapixels, and now Sony's is 60, and I reckon Nikon will be in that space this time next year, I feel like that's a big gap that's Canon's going to have to close, and they're going to have to close it with technology that's equal to or better than. Otherwise, it's like, well, that's not a very compelling thing. So Canon users, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. I love Canon. I love all cameras. I own cameras from almost every manufacturer. So this is not a beating on Canon thing. This is just discussing what's going on. What are these companies doing? What do their futures look like? What should you invest in? And does Canon have the chops? Do they have the money to solve their sensor problems? Because I do think there's a problem there. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, thank you so much for watching. It's so lovely to see you here in the van as I drive around the suburbs. Please, of course, if this is your first time here and you like what I'm saying, please subscribe. Please like, please share. It makes us all smarter. And I look forward to your thoughts and seeing you soon. And if you have any ideas for videos, please let me know and take it easy. All right. Come on, Canon. You know we love you, and we know we'd love to see you just keep on keeping on. You've had such a great name for so long, and now Sony's coming to get you. Actually, Sony's coming to get everybody.